Hello everybody, the iLord Root here, and welcome back to Let's Play Kerbal Space Program. Following our somewhat disastrous moon landing, I've decided that the best thing for us to try to do is maybe get a little bit more practice with docking so that we can do it a little bit more easily. And also, in particular, I want to try to get the space station up into orbit. So we're going to take a modular approach to this, sort of like the ISS, right? And the idea here is basically to get us more into practice. So there are a lot of things here that make up this first core, or this first module of the space station. And in fact, I'm using two modules here. I've got of course, our core habitation module. We've got I believe it's 12 solar arrays on it to keep it powered during the night, and of course we have a probe core on it so that we can rotate it when we get it up into orbit, which is going to be important because these habitation modules by themselves do not have enough torque, or really any torque, for us to be able to move around. And then we've also got this RCS/xenon fuel sort of deal going on here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to launch this first, and then I'm going to launch a secondary or tertiary module that we're going to dock underneath that RCS fuel. And we will use these large docking rings here to connect our modules together. I'm using the smallest ones largely for I guess things like probes and very small craft to dock to. And you'll see we've also got the small docking ports on our new launch stack, which I'll tell you a little bit about. So I decided that it's about time that, instead of building a custom launch stack for each sort of vehicle we send into space, we need to standardize. So I've created this series of rockets. This is what I like to call the Turin class, and it's a very, very light sort of launcher. I mean, you got one 2.5 meter or 2 meter core in the center, and then that's basically the basis for everything. And it too has a space probe core on it, so that what we could do is we can essentially deorbit these things if we put enough fuel on them. And the docking ports will come in handy because as we launch the bits of our space station, then what we'll be able to do is we'll be able to remove, most of the fuel from it and maybe put it into our tug. And so that'll become important later on down the line. But right now, all I want to do is I want to get this thing up into orbit. So we will launch this this Turin 5M vehicle with our launch stack, on top of it, or rather our payload on top of it. And that is actually somewhere around 7-8 tons, I think. So this should be able to do it with fuel to spare, but we're going to do this the old-fashioned way. So I'm just going to go ahead, get this thing ready to launch, and we will bring up our nav ball so that we can go ahead and get this thing ready to go. So let's just throttle up and we will get the show on the road. So you can see this launch stack in particular has a lot of thrust, and that's no accident. I've actually got a heavier version of this that can bring some 30 or 40 tons up into orbit, which is not bad. I mean, it's definitely, a pretty respectable amount of thrust, and we get a lot of you know, thrust out of this thing. So one thing that is worth noting here is we do have of course this asparagus staging that I finally found a way to do it in a relatively easy manner. Because the deal with asparagus staging is if you don't do it correctly, then you can, of course, screw up your, you know, you can screw up your staging and get things, you know, out of whack. And I guess traditional asparagus staging sort of has, this, I suppose, you would call it like, it has 6 outer stages or something like that. That's most of the ones I've seen. That seems, I guess, a little bit excessive to me for the most part for most of these payloads we'll be launching, because they're going to be small, right? I mean, we could conceivably launch this thing fully assembled, and my initial designs did have that because, you know, when you dock, you do, you know, get things slightly off of balance. But, I mean, I don't really want to have to deal with that too terribly much. So let's see, are we getting overheating at all? I don't think we are. We are still good on our fuel. So we're going to go up to 125 meters. And that shouldn't be too terribly hard to do. I mean, it's, you know, it's going to be, much easier to do that than to, let's bring this down so we don't overshoot it. But it's going to be much easier to do that than it is to, oh, wow, I did overshoot it. Well, we'll correct that. But, you know, anyway, where I was going with this is that, you know, we want to essentially, you know, get this thing into orbit as easily as possible. And I mean, it's, see where we at, 167. Screwed that up. Let's see. We are in space already. We've got about 3 minutes not to screw this up. We've got our apoapsis way out here. I want to lower that apoapsis, but I'm just not sure how easy that's going to be. Let's see, what do we have? 86. 108. Let's see, 117. We're pretty close to our 125 meter orbit. And so the idea here is going to be that, you know, we're going to, we're going to get this thing up, as best we can. Apoapsis is still a little bit too high for my personal taste. I think maybe we're just going about this the wrong way. I think what I need to do is I need to get this thing up into orbit. 131, 32. I'll get this thing up into orbit and we will work from there, because it is a lot easier to do it that way. So apoapsis is at least a little bit lower, but I do want to get this thing as close as possible to our target, because it will take a little bit more delta V than, you know, we're accustomed to, and that's going to be, it looks like, an 18-second burn. So we will warp to our target node, or close to it. I'm going to start around 9 seconds or so. And you can see this thing still has plenty of fuel. Oh wow, we overshot it by quite a bit. So we're just going to do as best as we can. This is unfortunately going to use a little bit more energy than I want it to. Let's see. We'll just get our periapsis up here. We'll work from there. So we have a little bit less fuel than I bargained for. Unfortunately, because I did miss that node because I was busy, you know, flapping my gums. But that's not that big of a deal because now we at least have a ton of fuel left. I mean, we can hit that 111, I think, pretty easily. So that is 100. I'm gonna go for 125 or so. The nice thing about this is that we can make corrective burns. So I'll just shoot for 120 and we'll get in position. We have 4 minutes, it looks like. So we're just going to time warp through. But yeah, I was going to say that once we get this thing taken care of, we can make very subtle corrections to its orbit. I mean, we just want it to be reasonable, right? So, how much of a burn do we need? Probably, I'm going to say probably around 30 seconds or so seems like it'll do it. And we're pretty close. I'll start burning at 15 just in case, or a little bit ahead of time. And so we are very slightly off, but I'll take that. I think that that's probably the best we're going to do. And we've still got plenty of fuel left, at least for this part, so, one thing that we could do is we could, you know, bring our, whoa, just bring this out to our target here of, what is it, 125 or so. It doesn't have to be perfect, and of course, it invariably will not be. If I can get around 124 or so, that's 122. I'll take that. So, yeah, anyway, what I was saying is we're putting it in a higher orbit because we're going to reserve our 100-meter orbit for, regular, you know, duties, right? It's the same reason why we put the satellites in such a, high orbit. And so, let's warp to our apoapsis and get this thing started. And we may even want to correct our inclination a bit too. Let's see. I'll just get down to about 5 or so seconds, and I think we're good to burn. There we go, that is a much better orbit for us. I think we'll just come out here, we'll raise our apses some, You can see there's the flag from the other mission. And I do want to bring down our inclination very slightly. Just because of the fact that, it is very high. If I get it down to 0.2, that would be excellent. Let's see, 0.05. Our apses don't change much when we do this, so that's going to be good. I think 0.04 is about the best we're going to be able to get out of this. And then, of course, we will have to raise our apses, so... what is that? 125 and something. I think we made it just a smidgen too high. See, it would be nice if there was a way for this not to overlap. Like it does. That's 125, 271. I think that's probably going to be the best we're going to be able to do in this circumstance. So, if I didn't botch the launch, what my original intention is to be able to pull fuel out of this fuel tank, and then to, you know, to basically bring this thing, you know, to a, I just leave it enough to deorbit. But I don't think we're going to be able to pull that off at this point. I just think we're, going to have less than the amount of fuel we bargained for. So, let's see, we have 15 minutes until we get to that node. That's 35, so it is going to be, a very short burn. So a nice thing is that, you know, once you're in orbit, you know, something like this is not difficult to do. Let's see, what is our periapsis at? Okay, that's good enough. So, inclination is 0.05. We'll correct that later on. But we are now in orbit of Kerbin, and so I think what we want to do is we want to jettison this fuel tank. So, I will just get ready to do that now. I'll go ahead and stage, and then, before we forget, I think I unset the name from here. It took me forever to figure out how to set this as a station. Because it is a little, you know, it is a little, a bit, you know, interesting to see that most of our things, of our whatchamacallits, our probes are either capsules or probes or landers, and that's based off of the part usually. It automatically sets it. So the longest part for me about figuring that out is, you know, just basically, you know, trying to figure out which part would basically give you a station, and it turns out none of them do. It turns out that you're going to have to do that on your own. But we'll switch to, well, we'll throttle down first so we can switch to this. And there was one thing that I do need to do. I do need to point this towards the north. The reason for this is that it makes docking extremely easy. I mean, it's, you know, we could point in another direction, but then it would be very difficult to line this up, so, anyway, we'll just leave this here. We'll go back to the Space Center and we are going to bring up our first expanding module, or first expander module, or whatever, and then we're also going to bring up our first, crew member as well. And so what we'll do is we will go here and we will bring up the space tog that I've created. So it's probably no secret I watch a lot of Scott Manley, and I did get this idea from him, but it's a lot different of a design, it looks like. This one is actually, suitable for interplanetary missions. So this would be in his, what he would call in his reusable space program. Videos like the space train or whatever. This is essentially it. This kind of combines the two. And we've got another thing here. We have a docking terminator, which we'll use for basically terminating off those large module thingies, and I guess docking clamps, and then we can dock normal ships to it. That's what the intermediate docking clamps are going to be used for. So we haven't really messed around with MechJub beyond our rendezvous, and MechJub actually does a much better job of launching than I do, so it might be kind of interesting to see this thing in action. I guess depending on where we place this thing, we may or may not depend on MechJub for doing the rendezvous, and we're definitely not going to depend on it for docking, because the docking, as it turns out, is very broken in this release. But we will give ourselves an orbit of about, I don't know, maybe we can even rendezvous from here. I wonder how well that'll work. If, probably not. But we do want to wait for this thing to get to our side of the planet. Then we'll make a decision about rendezvous once we get into orbit. So this station is going to be creeping up on us pretty quickly, and the reason we want to do this is essentially so that we spend as little time, trying to rendezvous with it. So we will just watch the autopilot. It does a magnificent job, as it turns out. I mean, it's very efficient. It's probably the most efficient thing in MechJub, because the rendezvous autopilot is pretty accurate for the most part. It does burn through a lot of fuel, though. That reminds me, speaking of which, I need to go here, and I'm going to turn off the feed for this engine, because, or for this tank rather, because it will use that tank quite liberally. And we'll turn it on if we need to, but we shouldn't. Because as I tend to recall, there is enough fuel here to get the job done. And you'll notice this is slightly out of balance because we do have a lot of hardware on this. We have, of course, headlights that we can see when we're about to crash into something. And we have lots of RCS because that's what we're going to use. And we have the fuel tanks. And we can use all of these things to basically not only, move ourselves around in space, but we can even perform like fuel transfers and stuff. So once we get this thing into orbit, we're going to dock it, and then we're going to essentially use this thing to perform all kinds of interesting things for us. You might have also noticed too, like, we do have xenon tanks on here, and the idea is that we could use those smaller docking ports to give these probes a little bit of a small push if we wanted to, or if we want to use ion engines. That's definitely something where a lot of xenon is going to come into play. But it's one of those deals to where ion engines in general are not... I think RCS is in fact more efficient. But, or it's not that it's more efficient, but it has more thrust. So, anyway, like last time, you can see that this thing is handling this wobbly rocket very well. I mean, it's going to get us hopefully out of the atmosphere pretty soon. It's doing its gravity turn a whole lot more efficiently too. I mean, it's always hard for me to judge the best way to do these things, because you don't really want a, you know, I guess to get a more efficient burn, like, you don't want to be going at 45 degrees to normal. The reason I do that is largely because it's easier. It's a good rule of thumb. I think something like this, doing it manually, is a lot more difficult, in my opinion. But it will get us into that orbit that we're pretty close, at least. You know, it'll even get us at like the right orbital speed. And, you know, speaking of which, I wonder where our space station is at right now. We are actually a little bit behind it, so we're going to want to get up ahead of it. So if we look at these these tanks on the side, they're not even depleted yet. This is fairly well off. It's going to probably take forever for this thing to get up to speed, so I guess I'll talk a little bit about the you know, why we might want a space station in general. And I think the most compelling reason is, you know, it gives us a sort of a stepping stone into space, because once you get into space, it turns out that, you know, fuel isn't an issue. I mean, the atmosphere is the biggest thing to worry about. And I think at this point, you know, we don't have to worry too much about, we don't have to worry too much about, our deal once we get into orbit, about our fuel, because we can put some very massive payloads into orbit, and this is a relatively small fuel tank here, but it will eventually get to be very, it'll get to be very, limiting. But it does also add us some docking ports that we can use to dock some other spaceships, so that'll be nice for sure. We probably will not be docking, well, I don't know, we could, in principle, dock this tug off of something other than the docking terminator. I mean, it's, it probably wouldn't be such a bad idea to, actually, but, you know, like, the thing I was going to get at is that, you know, my plan is for this thing to eventually, you know, I don't want it to really be a linear sort of deal, to where, like, it's just a really long tube in space. Like, I eventually want to design, a module that can have, like, maybe 6 of these large module docking ports on them, and that will do a lot for us. I mean, that will give us plenty of room to play around with. So how are we doing on our fuel? We've still got plenty of it left, and now that we're out of space, it's not going to be an issue. However, I don't think I will use, I probably will not use, Mech Jub's, rendezvous facility. We should auto-warp. And the reason for that is, it does seem to burn a lot of fuel. Like, its idea of getting you into, a proper rendezvous is, essentially, you know, bringing out your orbit to a very, high point, and then after that it will, you know, it'll wait for the object to catch up to it, and it is very accurate. I mean, if you say you want to be 30 meters away, it will make you 30 meters away. But that is not going to be any good for us. We're at 20 kilometers here, 21. So we want to lower our orbit very slightly. Not much. I mean, we want this thing to maybe go down to 120 at the most. And this is another thing about Mech Jub that you do have to remember too, if you do decide to do things manually. You know, it will occasionally do this thing to where, let's see, where's Apsis? 20 kilometers here and 21. You know, it will occasionally, you know, or, well, entirely, every time, disable, Mech Jub, or not Mech Jub, but the SAS. And so if you're depending on that, then it's not the best thing. Did we move past our apoapsis? We'll just lower that orbit a bit. Just a hair, because we want this thing to, I mean, to be fairly low. Oh wait, we're burning with respect to the target. That always seems to happen to me, is that we always seem to burn with respect to our target, and that is not what I want to do. I want to lower my apoapsis just a hair, instead of, you know, trying to hit the target. So, let's see, what can we do here? We'll just bring that down as close to, 121. That will give us a couple of orbits that we're going to have to complete, but on the flip side, that will mean that when we get here, that we'll be less than 3 kilometers away, so I think I'm going to get that down to even less, maybe to 1 kilometer. And it shouldn't be too much to get it back up. I mean, that's the hope anyway. So, you know, once we are at that 1 kilometer mark, we will burn towards our target, and I think we'll come out ahead very slightly. But with that having been said, I mean, I think it's worth pointing out that, you know, when we get to this encounter, you know, we're gonna have a little bit of time to get up here, but we want to now move with respect to the target. We're we're fairly close in right now, so I'm gonna null out my velocity whenever I get here and just make a straight approach towards the towards our target when we hit this. So y'all have seen the rendezvous plenty of times, I'm sure by now. I'm not gonna make a big deal out of it. However, I will show you where mech jump does become incredibly useful when we do get close enough. So let's see, we're very close now, and we'll just bring this down to yeah, we'll just null out that velocity just a little bit. Now we could use RCS for this, and that would be valid. Let's see, 1 kilometer. At this point, it is probably best if we just go for a straight shot. There we go. I think I'm moving a little bit away, but that's okay. I mean, I think, you know, we don't have too much really to worry about here, and we'll just coast along at maybe 10 or so meters per second, so that we don't run the risk of accidentally, you know, screwing this thing up. So we'll just move towards it. You can see we're very close in now. We should be able before too long. Maybe even 5 will do, or 10. Yeah, we'll do 10 so we can time warp in and change things as we get close to our rendezvous point. So, it may not actually be worth it even to time warp at this point. I mean, we may get so close to it whenever we, you know, do our... Once everything is said and done, I'm going to use a little bit of RCS to get us where we need to go, because we overshot it just a little bit. But you know, once we get within 100 meters, I'm going to start bleeding off some of this velocity. And I call that a pretty clean rendezvous. I mean, it's, MechJub would have probably spent a lot of fuel in order to get this thing down to, see, we are moving a little bit further away than I think I want to. And we've got this weird... There we go. It's not absolutely perfect, but it will do. I mean, we are very close at this point. So, yeah, we will go ahead and do that rendezvous. And we'll go at, I don't know, 2 meters a second. Give us a little bit of wiggle room. And if worse comes to worse, we will, you know, quickly get out of the way. This is a little bit faster than I probably should be going. There we go. So we're at 9 meters a second. You know what? I'll just start very slowly inching my way over here. Because we do happen to have, still, we'll go ahead and we'll set our south docking port as the area for which we want to dock, and we will get as close as we can. So, let's see, null out that velocity. And we still have a bit of a non-zero component here, just because of the way we, let's go over here, that's closer to us. Just because of the way we're moving. So the nice thing is that MechJob lets you set up your own windows with your own utilities in them. And one that I've put in that I've found to be extremely valuable when docking with these larger docking ports, because they are a lot more difficult to dock with. That's the you know, that's the trade-off. Is that these, whoa, the trade-off is essentially that, you know, these things are, you know, very, very difficult to pull off. So what we can do here is we will, in fact, once I bleed off a little bit of this movement, I will go ahead and there we go. I think that's going to be fairly difficult for us not to do, but I'll go ahead and orient us along our north axis, and we will go in for the docking. So we need to be facing south, which means that we need to come around here and do our thing. I'll kill this guidance computer. And it doesn't lag this much usually whenever I play this. I think it's, or rather whenever I, you know, did the dress rehearsals for this or whatever, the lag seems to be largely a factor of, well, I guess the fact that I'm recording a video and the fact that this machine only really has 2 gigs of RAM. So we are a little bit off course already, but we'll deal with that. And so what's cool about, anyway, about having this window is that we can now, you know, if we tried to use MechJob to dock with this, it would be very difficult to do. I mean, it would, let's see, wrong way. In fact, I maintain that it would be maybe not impossible, but oh no, that's not what I want to do. We'll just use our deal here to get that set up. And we'll try to zero that out. And same deal with this, yeah. You know, same deal with this. Where did I screw up? I am, in fact, using RCS here, even though you can't really see the... You can't really see the thing. And you know, I think it's probably much better if we take care of our X separation first, because that's where most of our, you know, distance is. So we will use a little bit of fuel for this, but it'll be worth it because we want to get in as close as we can. I mean, that's essentially, you know, the trade-off that we're going to make here whenever we, you know, don't use MechJeb for the rendezvous, is we may not be able to get in as close as we'd like. But I mean, that'll be okay. I think, you know, in reality, I think I probably should have used RCS to go towards the station anyway. But, you know, we are inching in very closely. It is going to take a little while, so I'm going to turn on time acceleration just a little bit, and we'll just bring this down to several meters per second. And we'll kill as much of that velocity as we can. Because we do... Wait, which way are we going? Why is this causing us... Oh wait, we're going negative, no wonder. So, we are moving very slightly away from this thing. Which, you know, I don't mind so much. It's not really a huge deal to me. We do want to, in our Z, we do want to arrest our Z just a little bit. And we'll do the same with, our Y. And finally, we will bring down our X just a hair. Because we are a little far out, so... Yeah, I mean, if we tried to use, for instance, the, if we tried to use our, MechJeb to do this, like, I did save, so I'll show you what happens when you try to use MechJeb for this, like, it'll, you know, it'll end up, deciding, you know, hey, I'm gonna make all these really weird turns and, you know, possibly, you know, oh wait, well, yeah, it's doing that because I have the wrong docking port selected. But, I mean, it will take forever because, like, what it's going to do is it is going to, well, now it's going to turn around. It's not going to be fair if you know, if I don't have the right docking port selected to show you. So where's our docking info, by the way? So like we're very slightly off right now, right? But if we say control from here, right? That'll put our docking port to the north. We're pretty close, right? But if we say now we want to dock, then you know, it's going to you know, it might be able to dock if we do this because we're close, but then again, it may end up doing this whole thing to where, you know, it basically decides that, you know, it's going to try to get the docking axis just perfect, and it just can't, you know, it's already beginning to burn through RCS fuel like nobody else's business. And, you know, it's just gonna sit here and rotate, you know, forever, pretty much. Although this one, it may do. And that is certainly nice, but you see it's gone off course now and it has to make the correction, and it's a very wasteful process. You know, it kind of rushes, so to speak. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to dock this manually, but with the readouts from MechJob. And so, let's see, where are we at right now? We need to, first of all, bring this down just a bit so that we don't run into our docking area. Because we do want a little bit of clearance here, you know, lest we induce a rotation in the dill. I'm just gonna go about 1 meter per second in. This is going to lower us very slightly, but that's okay. I mean, it's not, you know, a huge deal. Notice, like, if you're watching the nav ball at the bottom, like, we're actually doing something pretty cool. We are moving that docking reticule rather, to intersect with our heading. Let's just bring this down just a little bit. I want to be about 2 meters or so. And we are getting pretty close in. So let's see. I'll just make sure that, you know, the closer we get in, we do want to speed up just a little bit, because we can, at this point, we can manage our approach pretty easily. Once I start getting under 1 or so, in the X direction, 1 meter or so, I'm going to start slowing down so that we don't, you know, get rid of this, this separation as quickly. I mean, ultimately, we want to get this thing down to, what is going on here? MechJob is sort of lying to me about this. I think, you know, I think it must be lag. Anyway, I mean, that's that's close enough in my opinion. You know what, I think for some reason fine control was off. We are very slightly... Oh, I think we can actually go in for the kill at this point, to tell you the truth. I mean, it's... I don't think we're going to get much better than this. We can even go just a little bit faster. And so yeah, we are now docked with our space station, which is pretty nifty. I mean, it's definitely... There is one thing I do want to do. I'm going to control this from here. I do want to release that docking ring and get it aligned with us. Or, yeah. I guess it is a docking ring, isn't it? But, yeah, I mean, I want to get it aligned so that what we can do is, you know, we can, first of all, we do want to be very careful about this because we want it to, you know, we want to rotate in the right direction. And we do want to, see, that looks about good. I mean, we do want to get this thing more or less on the right heading, which I think that is probably going to be the best we can do. I just have to manage to get this thing in. And we'll use that docking port up there as sort of a reference. I think we should go just a little bit faster than we are, just so we don't drift too far off course. Because we're barely moving at this point. And, you know, I'd say that is, in my mind... Whoa, what happened here? Are we... We didn't dock, did we? I don't understand that. I guess we're just a little bit... Oh, we've got a little bit of... We have a little bit of movement here. Let me arrest this, let me arrest this rotation just a little bit. Because we are, at this point, you know, we are very far off course. And we don't want to be. We want to be as close in as possible. But yeah, this thing, unfortunately, is not going to be easy. Because it seems like we're somehow colliding with the station. I think my best bet... Oh, no, wait, no. Well, I am certainly glad that... You know, I'm certainly glad that, that I put a, you know, a probe core there. So let's just bring this up. This is just going to hold its position here. And we will switch back to the tug, which at this point is fairly off course, and we're drifting just a little bit. So let's see, we have our X that we need to bring. Yeah, our X is way too far off. And control from here. We got this set as our target, hopefully. I mean, naturally, this does not always work as planned. And I guess I could have actually stood to profit from, in particular from, you know, I guess putting lights on the back so I could see what I was doing. But that actually is not as easy as you might think. Let's see. Now the question is, are we still in rotation? I believe the answer to that to be no. No, I guess, you know, we could use mech job to bring us this far in, but I mean, really, who wants to be bothered doing that? Let's see. Just bring that down. And we're about at 0. We're drifting very slightly, it seems. And I think at this point, yeah, we do have this issue to where we are off course. Just very slightly. So that initial docking attempt is okay. But it's this thing right here. I mean, it's... I suspect we are, in some sense, there we go. Yeah, that's, you know, I was gonna say that's one of the issues here is that, you know, in some sense, like, you do gain, you know, this, this sort of deal here, but, you know, this sort of, oh, whatchamacallit, this sort of, advantage to where you can see precisely what, you know, is going on. But then, as it happens, you know, occasionally the thing does give you inaccurate statistics. I mean, it's still a lot easier than trying to dock these manually, because we use the big docking ports on on our, lunar lander. Or I guess I should rather say mooner. Yeah, I mean, we can now, we can now more or less just leave this thing here, and when we come back, we could do a lot of things. We could bring other Kerbals up here to live. We could add more habitation modules. We might even add in, I guess, maybe, like, better power lines or whatever. And in the meantime, we can take Bob out, because Bob has, been flying around and is, now flying very rapidly from, from the space station. It's a good thing, if it's a good thing these things like have a lot of RCS fuel on, because the space shuttle, as it turns out, the man maneuvering unit on the space shuttle is whoa, it's a little bit too far down. I was not expecting to get kicked out of my capsule like that. But anyway, the MMU on the space shuttle has really very little delta V, and it's like some 25, right? And this dude would probably be able to get back in this situation if he wanted to. But on the flip side, it would be very difficult for him to, it'll be very difficult for him to otherwise get, back out, or to get there. Now, it turns out that the ones that are on the MMUs that are in use on the ISS have even less, delta V. I mean, it's one of those deals to where, you could pretty much, like, you get 2 meters per second of delta V, and then you're screwed. That's why, they're mostly tethered, or they ride the robotic arm or anything. Anyway, we will find more food and not food, and refuse and trash and rubbish and junk to bring up here. I guess in the meantime, I will see y'all later.